Hey there, everybody. How are you guys tonight? I'm excited to get started. I'm going to push a timer. I'm going to give it 2 minutes for everybody to pile in and, get logged in and get all set and get your food and drink, whatever it is you want to sit in here. So we'll keep an eye on this. As soon as it hits 0, I'll get started. And today, like I said in the post, I'm not here to disparage Dr. Aaron or empaths. Actually, I'm here to offer solutions. So there's 5 things I'm going to cover to clear up this misunderstanding about the empath HSP. The first thing I'm going to show you is I am going to definitively prove with Dr. Aaron's own words from her documentary, where she claims she came up with this whole diagnosis, how she actually misread what happened to her, and what she's really describing is childhood trauma and severe codependence. So that's the first thing I'm going to do is show how she was just human, perfectly imperfect. The second thing I'm going to do is, many people are confused between empath and empathy, and I'll show you the difference between the two so that you can see why empath, that term, is actually codependence, and it's not a unique personality trait. Okay. The other thing to help you accept the truth that Dr. Aaron just made a mistake is I'm going to talk to you about how emotions actually are made. We're not born with them. The latest neuroscience, Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett, who's in the top 1% of all scientists cited for her work on the whole planet, we're going to dig into her work, which shows you how emotions work and further proves that Dr. Aaron made a simple mistake. Then for those of you, what's going to happen to a lot of you is you're going to go into denial. You're going to deny the truth. And I'm going to show you how your left hemisphere does that it'll deny truth and even make you the victim. And then finally, I'm going to offer you a lot of solutions. There we go. There's the timer. So let me just turn this off. I'm really glad to see all of you here. Just real quick, say hi to Alonzo, A Quiet Soul, Joel, Sharon, Panda Cat. So let's get started. The first thing is to give you the definitive proof that Dr. Aaron made a mistake. And to do that, a lot of this I'm going to draw from my newest book that just dropped, Your Journey to Being Yourself. And this comes from one of the sections. It says the empath, highly sensitive person conundrum, because that's what in her documentary, she calls it a conundrum. So I'm just going to read you a short little bit, and I'm going to highlight certain phrases she uses that proves that she misunderstood herself and what she was experiencing as a child. Okay. So here's how it reads. Elaine Aaron, the clinical psychologist and researcher who developed the term highly sensitive person in the documentary Sensitive, The Untold Story, which chronicles her own story, her study, and her life experiences. She begins by recounting her childhood and sharing that her parents repeatedly forced her into situations that were really bad for her. She goes on to say, and these are her exact words. It kind of reads funny because she's talking, and I quoted her exactly, but I'm going to read to you exactly what she said. She says, I couldn't learn to swim like the other kids. I was afraid to put my head underwater because, gee, and this is the critical part, I had been told a million times, don't drown, don't go near the water. You might fall in and drown. And all of a sudden, I'm supposed to put my head in? So that's the kind of conundrum that sensitive children get into because they're being asked by their parents to do things that are hard for them, but easy for other kids. And then parents go to this place of, there's something wrong with my kid. Did you see it? Did you see with her own words? She says, I had been told a million times. She was conditioned to be afraid of the water. She wasn't born sensitive of water. She wasn't afraid of water. Her parents induced her fear into her. One thing many people don't realize is the first 7 years of our life, all of us are in a theta brainwave state. Do you know what the theta brainwave state is? It's the exact same brainwave state you are put in when you are put in hypnosis. We are all in hypnosis the first 7 years, just downloading the emotional programs from our parents. We're not conscious, we're just absorbing the emotions from the world. Her parents, a million times, downloaded into her in a subconscious state that she should be afraid of the water. She wasn't born afraid of the water, she was conditioned to be afraid of the water. That is severe childhood trauma. That is codependence. What that points to is parents who had severe childhood trauma they'd never addressed that was showing up as shame, and that's what's called induced shame. So because of their unresolved fear and trauma issues, they dumped it into her as a child. This is how it works because they couldn't be reasonable. So what this tells me, and here's the other thing, is people want to say, well, I was born this way. Well, do you know that the emotional condition of the mother during pregnancy shapes the genetic and DNA makeup of the child? So if a mother is experiencing fear or any emotion, she's changing the child. She's traumatizing the child. Now, this isn't blaming mothers because a father who lost his job puts stress on a mother. A father who treats the wife poorly this isn't a female problem. The mother isn't to blame. What this points to is how severe unhealed childhood trauma is in all of society. And because we don't have what I call emotional authenticity, which is way beyond emotional intelligence, I'll get into that a little bit later. We all dump our trauma into our child, our unhealed shame and fear. What she is describing are the first two stages of what I laid out in my first book, Your Journey to Success, the worst day cycle. Stage one, there are 4 stages. Stage one is trauma. We all experience trauma in childhood. This is trauma. Her parents' fear and their inability to regulate themselves, they dump trauma into her. That leads to stage 2, fear. What is she describing? She's purely petrified. That kicks us into stage 3, shame. And this is where, see, trauma, we create either a disempowered reaction or a falsely empowered reaction. As a child, she created a disempowered reaction. She went helpless, powerless. She shut down. That's the experience of shame. And some go, but here's what she did. She went disempowered because of the shame, but then she created a falsely empowered solution, claiming she was highly sensitive or an empath. Do you see how that takes away the low self-esteem that we experience when we can't do something because her parents were shaming her? They're inducing fear in her, and then they're telling her she's bad. They've traumatized her, and then they're going, well, why are you so afraid? I know we're making you afraid, and we're responsible for this, but we're not going to take responsibility. A lot of this is subconscious. But you're somehow to navigate that as a 2 and 3-year-old child. It's impossible. And so a child feels that shame because now the parents are filled with shame because their daughter's a failure. And that's why they keep hammering on the child. So the child can go either disempowered or falsely empowered. She went both. Disempowered, staying away from the water, but then created a falsely empowered solution by elevating herself and saying, well, I was just born with a unique trait. Now, this is what we all do. This isn't to shame her. This is how trauma, fear, shame, and denial work, the worst day cycle. I'm not going to divert you with all of that. I'm just giving you a basic understanding, okay? So that's the first step, is you can now see by her own words, she was traumatized by her parents and conditioned to be afraid of the water. She wasn't born sensitive. She was made sensitive. Now, let's get to the second promise I made to you was to further prove this based on how emotions are made. Originally, Dr. Paul Ekman, there was a famous study he did, and he said we were all born with, certain base emotions. Well, consequently, just like Dr. Elaine Aaron, all of his research has been proven false. He misled everybody in the studies. They were set up to give conditioned responses. We now know that none of that is true. We aren't born with emotions. They are learned constructs. We all learn them from 3 things: our parents, the society definitions that were around at the time and the state of our body. So I'm going to read to you a little bit more. This comes again from my book. And like I said, this comes from Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett. She's the expert. Now, I'm going to stop and give you a solution. For those of you who are empaths or consider yourself to be an empath or HSP, and anybody else, this book is a must read because you have to get into reality of what's happening to you emotionally, that it's a learned construct as a result of childhood trauma. This is Dr. Feldman Barrett's book, How Emotions Are Made. This will really bring you into reality so that you can stop hurting so much and you can start to see how you were conditioned, just like Dr. Aaron, by your parents to have the emotional reactions that you're having right now. Okay. So there's solution number one. Pick up this book, How Emotions Are Made by Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett. So this is what she says. Well, first, it's me. Furthermore, emotions aren't preset or predetermined, nor are they genetic. As mentioned, genes are activated by environmental stimuli, be it a person, place, interaction, or circumstance. See, a lot of people go, oh, it's my genes. Well, that's not how genes work. You can be born with your gene having some sort of trait, but that trait will only activate if it's placed in an environment where it will activate. So if you're placed in an environment, with parents, just like Dr. Elaine Aaron, who have shame and fear problems, that gene will activate. It was only activated by the environment it was placed into. Okay. So just because your family history involves cancer, heart disease, addiction, or any other illness, you aren't automatically set up for this fate. If and only if your mind and body experience an environment in which those genes experience mental and physiological health adversity, will those negative genetic conditions activate and thrive. Many people wave it off, saying something runs in the family and must be genetic. What they should acknowledge is that the emotional simulations, concepts, and definitions are intergenerational, leading to emotional dysregulation being passed down through parenting and societal definitions. As a result, certain conditions perpetuate throughout their lineage, as Dr. Barrett explains. Now, this is quoting from her book. Particular concepts like anger or disgust are not genetically predetermined. Your familiar emotional concepts are built in only because you grew up in a particular social context where those emotion concepts are meaningful and useful, and your brain applies them outside your awareness to construct your experiences. Heart rate changes are inevitable. Their emotional meaning is not. Other cultures can and do make other kinds of meaning from the same sensory input. So what this means is, depending on where you're raised and how you're raised, just because like anger will mean something different to everybody. Certain expressions, people will see it and go, wow, they were angry. The person next to them go, what do you mean? They were laughing. That all depends on the environment they were placed into and the simulations, concepts, and definitions that they ascribe to them. Okay. So we all of our parents have different emotional definitions. All societies have different emotional definitions for things. And so based on what the environment you and your genes were placed in, you will create an emotional reaction. And so this is what's happening to the empath HSP. They're reliving the emotional concepts that were dumped into them, the definitions. It's unhealed codependence and trauma that they're experiencing. Okay. And I forgot, before I got into emotions, I was going to tell you the difference between empath and empathy. A person with empathy is able to contain themselves. When they see somebody experiencing pain or hear a story of pain, they draw on their own experience of pain to empathize with what that person is going through. The empath, it's the opposite. They suck in the emotional experience of the other person. They have lost what are called internal boundaries and external boundaries. That's because, just like Dr. Elaine Aaron, her parents, who didn't have any emotional containment, they had no internal boundaries around their own fear and shame, they dumped it into her. And that's what's happened to the empath. As a child, the construct, and most empaths are like, no, my childhood was great. Remember, the first 7 years were in a theta brainwave state. By the time your consciousness came on, the childhood trauma you've experienced has become normalized. You don't even notice it. You've already created adaptations and belief systems and responses, and you've either gone disempowered or falsely empowered due to the trauma. You've created a personality based on the trauma history in your first 7 years. You think it's the authentic you. It's not. It's an adaptation. And now it is true, you are highly sensitive, but that's because you were raised severely codependent with severe trauma. And so you have no internal containment. When you're around people, places, or things, you suck in all of the emotional energy because you were around parents and in a societal construct where there were no boundaries. It was pure codependence, and everybody transgressed yours, and you learned to swallow them. They never, because the parents couldn't model healthy internal boundaries, neither could you. You swallowed all of theirs, and it became normalized. It became a personality trait to be boundaryless and unable to protect yourself. Because remember, empathy is different. I can stay contained. I can see and feel your energy, but I have a bubble around me where it doesn't penetrate because I'm not codependent. I can retain my boundaries and protect myself from your energy, whether it's anger, sadness, whatever it may be. So those who get affected by other people's energy, it's because they lack internal boundaries. That's a codependent process. That's a childhood trauma. That's a result of childhood trauma. Okay. So that's what's happening to the so-called empath and HSP. They've experienced pretty heavy childhood trauma and pretty heavy codependence, and they have no internal boundaries to protect them from everybody else's emotional energy. So they are they are empaths, but they don't have empathy. I mean, I want to make this clear. It's not that they don't care. Don't misunderstand me. It means when I say they don't have empathy, what I'm saying is they have no internal boundaries. All right. Because somebody with empathy can see and see what you're going through and empathize with it. In other words, go, wow, I've been in that situation. I know when I felt like that, it felt like this. All right. So in other words, they draw on their own emotional experience. They don't swallow the emotional experience of the person experiencing the emotion. All right. So that's the difference between empath and empathy. All right. So the next piece of this is to recognize. This is another quote from Dr. Aaron. She says, and now that I've explained the difference between empath and empathy, she says, I hope by now you appreciate the drama that's going on here. Emotion words are not about emotional facts in the world that are stored in the static. Excuse me, let me try that again. Emotion words are not about emotional facts in the world that are stored like static files in your brain. They reflect the varied emotional meanings you construct from mere physical signals in the world using your emotional knowledge. You acquired that knowledge in part from the collective knowledge contained in the brains of those who cared for you. So once again, here's the proof. Dr. Aaron created concepts and definitions that she was sensitive based on the brains of those who cared for her, her parents. Her parents were filled with shame and fear. And so she collected that knowledge and went, oh, that's sensitive. Wow, they're really afraid of water. Guess I need to be too. That's the definition I'm supposed to have because they're the ones raising me. And so I have to model them. All right. And this is what Dr. Barrett, her research is showing about emotions. And so that's why there's not an empath or HSP. It's childhood trauma and codependence. All right. So she goes on to say, from the people who cared for you, talked to you, and helped you to create your social world. Emotions are not reactions to the world, they are your constructions of the world. So what's happening is, as an adult, every single emotional reaction any of us have, we're not in the present. They are learned constructs in childhood. And I'm going to prove it to you. I want all of you to think of anger. We've all been angry at some point. All right. So think of something that happened to you in the last week that made you angry. I really want you to focus on that anger and the situation that happened. All right. So the next question I want to ask you is, where in your body do you feel that anger? For most, it's probably in their stomach or their heart or their head. It can be in your shoulders. It can be anywhere else. But focus on how you were angry at somebody and where in your body you felt it. Now, here's the proof that you're reliving your childhood. Ask yourself question number 3. What's your first memory of being angry? Now, most people are going to remember something within 2 to 5 years from, this week when they got angry. Okay, write that down. Now ask yourself, what's your next memory earlier than that? Write that down. What's your next? What's your next? Eventually, you're going to arrive at some event that happened between 2 and 10 years old. You may not remember a specific event, but you might remember, God, there's something around 3, 4 years old. I don't remember what happened, but I feel really angry. All right. You don't have to remember the event. There's the proof that you learned the emotional construct or simulation, construct, and definition for the word anger. And so when you're angry in the moment, just like she says, it's not that somebody made you angry. It's not that something that happened. You're reliving unhealed anger from the past. That's how emotions work. And that's what the HSP or empath is experiencing, unhealed childhood trauma as a result of codependence. That's what happens to all of us. So this isn't to say that empaths are deficient. Every single one of us, whenever we have an adult emotional reaction, we are experiencing the worst day cycle. That's trauma. Your adult emotional experiences are being replayed in the present. That's trauma, which leads to fear, shame, and denial. And that's the proof that all of us are codependent, that all of us have experienced childhood trauma, and all of us get to decide if we want to develop emotional authenticity and heal that or not. I'll leave that up to you. I don't judge you, whichever way you want to go. But now you have definitive proof that Dr. Elaine Aaron was not born with any sort of emotional extra, because usually empaths see themselves, like someone was writing on it when I posted about this, someone on TikTok was very defensive, and I'm going to get into the denial part, how the brain and why this person got so defensive, but they're like, don't listen to him, this is our gift, he just doesn't get it. That's the false empowerment of, no, I have this blessing, I have this super skill. It is true, you are very sensitive. I am very sensitive. I've had to do so much codependence work because I struggle. I had all of these conditions. And once I figured out, oh, wait a minute, I wasn't born this way with some gift. This is because my mother enmeshed with me. I mean, all of my childhood trauma is in all my books and all my videos. You probably know all about that anyway, so I don't need to get into it now. I was conditioned to have no internal boundaries. And so I've had to work on that. And so I can now stay contained and have empathy, not all the time. I'm not perfect at it. I still become an empath and suck in other people's emotional condition. But now at least I'm aware of it. And I know the process to get myself back into my authentic self and put in place my internal boundaries so that I'm not affected. So the empath or HSP, this is the piece that they're missing in their construct. So now, and I just sidebar, if you're enjoying this presentation, you're more than welcome to donate. There's the thing there. Or if maybe you disagree and you're like, I really want to, argue with Kenny and have a discussion about this, you can use that. Whoever makes a donation and wants to ask a question, I'll put you at the front of the line as soon as I finish with the presentation here, because I'm not just going to talk to you about all of this. I want to answer your questions. Or if you disagree, I want to try and help you get past your left hemisphere, which I'm about to describe, and why you're going to go into denial and not accept these truths. Okay. So you can use that feature if you'd like to. All right. Now I'm going to read once again from my book, Your Journey to Being Yourself. And this will be a little bit longer because for those people who are still in denial and self-deception about the proof that I've just laid out about how emotions work, and Dr. Aaron, your left hemisphere is designed to be a denial-making monster. And even when shown proof that it's wrong, your left hemisphere, this is actually how it works. It doubles down in its falseness. And then you know what it does? It flips the script and makes itself the victim, blaming the other person. So let me describe. This is another great book. I highly recommend everybody get this book too. The Master and His Emissary. This is for those of you who still believe that your thoughts run your life. They don't. This is Ian McGilchrist took all the neuroscience studies from the past 20 years. It shows definitively everything we do is emotional. Every thought you have, every action you take is emotional. And so empaths need this. Everybody needs this understanding. And this is why I teach emotional authenticity, because if you're not learning the processes I teach, that's why you're struggling. And it's not that I teach them. It's just that this is the latest understanding of why we're struggling. And very few people teach about this. And that's why so few people are seeing benefit with the efforts that they're putting in. So there's another solution for you, is to pick up that book. Here's what Ian McGilchrist, I'm going to read some of it, and some of it's his quote. To fully accept this new truth, or it starts off how your brain hemispheres function. To fully accept this new truth, we must dig into what we know about the brain and how the two hemispheres work. I'm going to rely heavily on Ian McGilchrist's discoveries, which he discusses in the book, The Master and His Emissary. McGilchrist, pardon me, collated 20 years of neuroscience research and performed a macro-analysis. A macro-analysis is where you take all of the studies, every single one of them, like think of how big that is, and you distill all of that information into, okay, here, what are the conclusions? All right, so that's what he did. It's a massive undertaking. And you distill that into the most accurate, up-to-date conclusions regarding how the brain works. As a result, some startling old fairy tales have been resoundingly debunked, just like the empath HSP one. For instance, the brain isn't siloed. Instead, meaning, we've all been taught, oh, the right hemisphere does this, left does that, it's not how it works. The brain borrows from both sides. Instead, nearly every function borrows from every corner of the brain to achieve its end goal. Math and science abilities aren't solely a left brain activity. They rely on different parts of both hemispheres. It's also not true that one side handles only logic and one side creativity, or the left is male and the right is female. Even limiting each hemisphere to reasoning and emotion discredits the brain's holistically collaborative capacity. In fact, each side supports the other in nearly every function. The left hemisphere is more likely to create anger, be deluded, and become frozen in denial while jumping to irrational conclusions and dismissing new information. So everyone's teaching you stuff your emotions, use your logic, but the left hemisphere is terrible at using logic. You're going to learn it needs the right side to actually have logic. Conversely, while the right side isn't capable of speech, it understands many of the subtlest and most important elements of language better than the left. To say fear is isolated in the amygdala is also misleading. Just like most brain functions, it borrows from both hemispheres. While each hemisphere has primary roles and differences, the differences are much more subtle than previously believed. The new understanding of the brain shows that the idea that the left hemisphere is masculine, solid, stoic, intelligent, and dependable, while the right side is feminine, half-witted, airy-fairy, soft and cuddly, fantastical, flighty, insignificant, and grossly inferior, is just as much a myth as Santa Claus. Now, this is me writing. Pay attention to what you're feeling in your body as this chapter and this information about the brain's functions challenge you and your beliefs. As McGilchrist wrote, for many people, the left hemisphere will want to deny this new understanding because it takes on a life of its own by sort of stuffing its ears with sealing wax. In response to the right side's emotional alerts, oblivious to its counterparts' attempts to influence it, the left claims it's always right, regardless of indisputable evidence proving otherwise. Watch this naturally occurring act of denial by your left hemisphere so you can learn how your denial mechanisms run your inauthentic life. When you recognize this, you can better understand why you're caught in the worst day cycle and detached from your authentic self. My book teaches you how to reattach to your authentic self, my new one, how to conquer the worst day cycle, conquer all of this emotional trauma, and reattach to yourself. All right. So let's talk about how the brain processes. So how exactly does the brain process all information coming from the five senses and is initially filtered through the right hemisphere, which first creates an emotional awareness and reaction? So whatever you're doing in your life, and this is why feeling comes before thought. You're just walking down the street. You don't realize it. Your ears are taking in information. Your nose is taking in information, your eyes, and all of that's being filtered out of conscious awareness. You're having emotional reactions to the temperature outside. You're having emotional reactions to what you smell. All of that is influencing your thoughts because it comes in the right side and looks for, remember how emotions are created? Childhood. Your right hemisphere is scanning your childhood to see what simulations, concepts, and definitions it needs to pull up based on what you're experiencing. Okay. Then it passes that information over to the left. There it's trimmed down, categorized, labeled, and simplified before it's supposed to be tossed back to the right. A final emotional sifting completes the fullest, most complete, and accurate assessment for our best use and intellect. This last biological step of reconnecting with the right side is what's missing in our personal and societal constructs, and it happens often. Our tendency to finalize conclusions with left-sided thinking rooted in analysis and detailed computations leaves rigid outcomes of self-deception and denial. It lacks the fuller, more inclusive emotional neutralizer we need to achieve a balanced, more successful conclusion, judgment, or decision. That's why I teach emotional authenticity. If you don't know, if you can't create the process for your brain to work in concert with each other, that's why you're stuck as an empath, HSP, all of these different mental, emotional conditions. Okay. McGilchrist goes on to say, although the left hemisphere does not see and cannot understand what the right hemisphere understands, it is expert at pretending that it does, at finding quite plausible but bogus. This is what happened to Dr. Aaron. Quite plausible but bogus explanations for the evidence that does not fit its versions of events. So what did Dr. Aaron really do? It's what we all do. None of us want to admit our parents were imperfect, that they traumatized us. So she came up with a bogus but plausible explanation. Left hemisphere. Oh, I was just born with this sensitivity. I'm not going to deal with the truth. I teach four things: truth, responsibility, healing, forgiveness. We've all been conditioned, left-sided thinking. Remember, it's a denial-making monster, to deny truth. And that's why she missed it. She's just doing what we've all been taught. All right. And so she denied the obvious truth. Her left hemisphere went, nope. And I'm going to create a bogus How did he put it? Bogus explanations for the evidence that does not fit its version of events. I don't want to admit that my parents were the problem, so I'm going to create a bogus interpretation. All right, let's go on with the rest of what he says. The master, the right hemisphere, realizes the need for an emissary, the left hemisphere, to do certain work on his behalf, which he, the master, must not involve himself with, and reports back to him. That is why he appoints the emissary, his left hemisphere, in the first place. The emissary, however, knowing less than the master, thinks he knows everything and considers himself the real master, thus failing to carry out his duty to report back. McGilchrist's work reveals that the left side is built to operate as a denial-based, self-rejecting monster. This is why we're all detached from our authentic self, because what have we been told for centuries? Don't feel, just think your way through a problem. Shut your emotions down. It's impossible. Every bit of information that we ever consume, we have an emotional reaction first. That's what's so funny. Like, do you hear the left-sided denial monster right there? Everyone's saying, oh, get a hold of your emotions. Don't deal with your emotions. Use your logic instead. There's no logic without emotion. Like, it's just, I find it funny. It's all in the research. And that's what's funny when you read his book, is he literally shows you examples of neuroscientific studies where they show the importance of the right hemisphere and the conclusion that the neuroscientist wrote. And the neuroscientist literally says the exact opposite of all of his conclusions. Like here are all the stats from the studies that prove the right hemisphere rules there, the emotions rule everything. And then his conclusion, he denies it. And I just find it funny. Like, we're so perfectly imperfect. It's adorable. I just find it adorable that how we're so stuck. So anyway, start again. The left side is built to operate as a denial-based, self-rejecting monster and is less reliable than the right in matters of attention, perception, judgment, emotional understanding, and indeed intelligence, as it is conventionally understood. Even when the left side is exposed to truth and evidence or facts regarding its faulty processing, it will produce reasoning and actions that are even more false, more destructive, and completely wrong. It doesn't stop there. In fact, when the left side is exposed to truth of its faulty processing, it doubles down and sees the evidence of its falseness as fuel to keep pursuing its destructive line of thinking. To make matters even more dire, since the left is built to deny truth and responsibility, placing responsibility for its own wrongdoing on others is its second nature. The left side's goal is to remain steadfast in its need to be right. It may even go as far as flipping the script and casting itself as the victim of the situation, much like a narcissist. As McGilchrist puts it, the left hemisphere is not keen on taking responsibility. If the defect might reflect on the self, it does not like to accept it. But if something or someone else can be made to take responsibility, if it is a victim of someone else's wrongdoing, it is prepared to do so. So this is what Dr. Aaron did. She didn't want to make anyone a victim. She made her genes responsible. She didn't want to get into truth. She didn't want to live in responsibility and see, wait a minute, this is about my own childhood trauma and codependence that needs to be recovered from. Her left hemisphere took over and went, oh, it's genes. There's nothing we can do. It's this fantastical personality trait. Her left hemisphere completely took over, denied responsibility to protect, because we're what my book shows is the single greatest killer on the planet today is self-deception and denial, because we're all stuck in our left hemisphere with things like this. We're just so beautifully, perfectly imperfect. And we just don't talk about this stuff. So people don't know, and you can't be blamed, because most of you have probably, I mean, look, what does she say? 20% of the population is, now an empath or HSP. That means 20% of the population is being fed lies. They're not to blame. They're actually going, she's a professional. She's a researcher. She's completely wrong. And she's the so-called expert in the field. Well, how is that their fault? They think they're going to an expert to get an understanding of what's happening to them. Well, this is the problem with psychologists and psychiatrists. Unfortunately, what they get trained to do is diagnose and prescribe. They don't learn anything about codependence in school. Nothing. Childhood trauma, no. All they learn about, they treat the body and brain like a car engine, and that it just needs medication. Why is that? Because every college and university is funded by the drug companies. Would a drug company benefit from teaching people that it's codependence and childhood trauma? No, because then they couldn't sell drugs. And so that's why every medical school is designed to promote, I'm going to diagnose you as bipolar and all these things, and here are the 20 medications. It's a complete waste. In most cases, it's a complete waste. You're suffering from childhood trauma and codependence. You need emotional authenticity, but nobody can make money off that, not big companies. All right. Plus, remember what the left hemisphere does? It doesn't want to make us responsible. Wait a minute. I have to go do the work on me and my childhood? No. Give me the pill. Because if the defect might reflect on the self, and I'm not saying any of us are defective, we're perfectly imperfect. But this is what's happening to everybody who wants to go get pills instead of doing emotional authenticity, childhood trauma, and codependence recovery. They're going, wait a minute, that reflects on me, and I don't want to accept that. Then I'd have to take responsibility. So if I can blame something or someone else, if I can make them responsible, if I can somehow be a victim of someone else's wrongdoing or some fantastical genetic situation, my left hemisphere is prepared to do that. And that's why we're all stuck. And that's why I teach truth, responsibility, healing, and forgiveness, because you'll never get out of this empath and all of these so-called psychological diseases with pills. All they do is they offer symptom relief. They don't offer healing. And I almost lost my life pursuing all of that. That's why I went and became an expert in this, because I realized it doesn't work. And look, you're welcome to allow your left hemisphere to deny the truth I've just placed in front of you. In fact, I encourage you to do it. Don't change for me. I know this. Eventually, by doing that, you will drive yourself into enough pain, and you'll remember this presentation. And that's when you'll be ready for it. We all get there when we're supposed to. We're never too early, never too late. And so if you're still in massive denial and want to argue with the truth of this, that's okay. You can do that in time, because this is how self-deception and denial works, is you will use it and you will avoid getting into truth and taking personal responsibility for your recovery, as long as those denial mechanisms, the consequences aren't too severe. Because the reason we don't do recovery work is we're getting too many payoffs from our denial and self-deception, from playing the victim and blaming it on genes or the narcissist or somebody else. Because we get all this attention and sympathy. We don't have to be responsible. I get to just go get a pill. I don't have to do the work. My book, I don't want to divert to all the different payoffs we get by avoiding recovery. But eventually, the repetition of those payoffs don't deliver. It's kind of like, if you're an addict, you'd know what I'm talking about. The first time you got drunk, it was great. But now, every time you get drunk, it's miserable. Or maybe it was cocaine or whatever it is that you're addicted to. It's no longer paying off. The consequences are getting too severe. And if you've quit like me, that's what happened. The payoffs didn't pay off, and the consequences I didn't get DUIs, but the hangovers, the way I felt about myself, the poor life decisions I made, all of the consequences started outweighing the payoffs. And so if you want to hold on to your empath HSP label, all that tells me is you're still getting a lot of payoffs, but eventually you won't. You won't. And you'll be over here, and the consequences will be so big. You'll have had your fifth narcissist or divorce or whatever it may be, or most likely severe health issues. And eventually you'll go, man, I got to deal with this. And that doesn't mean you blew it and should have done it now. That's a sign of how much childhood trauma you were placed into and the resistance. That's called the attachment authenticity bind. I'm not going to get into that. It's in my book, but there's a reason that you will hold on to that. That's just too in depth for tonight. So before I get into solutions, I want to check the chat here. I want to see if anyone made a donation or anything, needs a question asked, but I do want to offer you solutions. So do you see, I just want to check and make sure that you see that Dr. Aaron was perfectly imperfect. She made a mistake. Her left hemisphere denied the truth and created a victim position so that she didn't have to get into truth and take responsibility, not because she's a bad person, but because we don't teach emotional authenticity. And so she just did the best she could with where she was at the time. All right. And that's the same holds true for anyone who is a so-called HSP or empath. All right. I also explained to you the difference between an empath and empathy. An empath has no internal boundaries. That is codependence. All right. They are affected by others' energy, others' emotions. They can't contain themselves. They don't have healthy empathy. That doesn't mean that they, aren't nice people and can't empathize with somebody, but they don't have any containment. And that's a hallmark of healthy empathy is internal containment. I can see and experience your experience, but it doesn't affect me. A so-called empath is affected, and that means they're not an empath. They are stuck in childhood trauma and severe codependence. And so if they want to no longer be affected, they need to make the choice to get into truth, take responsibility, and do the healing work. Okay? And from that place, they can forgive themselves for being perfectly imperfect and their parents and caregivers in society that taught them all of these conditions. All right? The third thing I did was show you how emotions, by asking those three simple questions, you can prove to yourself at all times that we're all stuck in the worst day cycle. We're all codependent. We've all suffered childhood trauma. Whenever you have any emotional reaction, ask yourself, what am I feeling? Now, you can go to my website under the resources tab. You can download a feelings wheel. I suggest people take that with them all day, every day, at least for 30 days. I used to set the alarm on my phone to go off every hour. Whatever I was doing, I checked the feeling sheet. I had to learn how to reattach emotionally, get out of my left side, get the full process going. So as much as possible, I was looking at that feelings wheel. What am I feeling? Where in my body do I feel it? What's my first memory? And I started cataloging all of those traumatic experiences. That's all the healing work I had to work on so I could get containment and no longer be an empath HSP, getting just totally, I just became a chameleon. I'd walk in a room and whatever the emotional energy was, I adopted it because that was my childhood. Well, I had to learn, and I'm going to give you skills and tools in a minute to create a boundary around yourself. All right. So hang in there. If you for those. And then finally, I showed you how the left hemisphere is a denial making monster. And even though I've just laid out tons of proof of how all of this works and offered several books for you to go do the investigation yourself, Lisa Feldman Barrett's How Emotions Are Made, so you can get an up-to-date understanding of emotions, The Master and His Emissaries, so you can see how the brain works, pick up my book so you can see how I've put all of this into a process for you to heal and get into truth, take responsibility, and reclaim your authentic self. Even though there's all of that proof, many people will still go into denial and flip the script and make themselves the victim so they don't have to get into truth that all of our parents are perfectly imperfect, so that they don't have to take responsibility. And instead of searching for a false term or placing responsibility on somebody else or something else, they take responsibility for themselves to do the healing work so they can forgive themselves and the people who are perfectly imperfect around them. Okay. Now, let's see. Adam says, thank you so much. My wife is calling me a loser to our kids as we speak. Well, Mike or Adam, if you pick up my book, you're going to learn how denial and self-deception works. And so whenever someone makes a judgment of us, they're talking about ourselves. So what you need to do is look for the descriptors and the metaphors. So I'm going to tell you exactly what your wife's saying. If your wife is saying your dad's a loser, what she's really saying is, I am a loser. So every time somebody says you, turn it to I, because that's how, whenever we judge, blame, and criticize, we're projecting how we feel about ourselves onto the other person. We're trying, people don't know that they're trying to tell themselves what they need to heal, what they need to get into truth about, that they feel like they're a loser, that they need to take responsibility for how shame and fear was dumped into them and created the emotional simulation concept and definition that they're a loser. So they need to get into truth, take responsibility, do the healing work. And once they do that, they'll no longer feel like a loser. They'll be able to forgive themselves because they go, my God, I got trained to do this. And then they can forgive. And then they can come to you and go, my gosh, I wish I'd have known this earlier. It's a shame the world doesn't teach this truth. I did the best I could with where I was, honey. I don't condone me calling you a loser, but I want you to know I've taken responsibility. I've put a plan in place. I'm doing the healing work. You don't have to forgive me. I'm working on forgiving myself for being perfectly imperfect and just doing the best I can, because experts like Elaine Aaron didn't teach us, because psychologists and psychiatrists don't get taught how to heal. They get taught how to diagnose and prescribe. And that's who we, the medical community is who we follow for answers, but they're funded by drug companies. So they only offer solutions that provide drugs, unless you get lucky like I got, and you have a therapist who went off and learned how to heal after going to school. Okay. That's incredibly rare. So if you have a therapist who just went to school and hasn't done outside work, I would encourage you find somebody else. If you want to heal. All right. Let's see who's on here. Bonnie's saying, got it. Yes, I was picking up on transference from my mom with my current situation. Good. Cindy said she had zero boundaries for 40 years. That makes me sad. Bob says, curious take. If one's emotional responses are predominantly learned, how do we then explain emotional disabilities like bipolar and depression? Because those are learned. What is depression? Emotions. The authentic self is depressed. So here's one of the biggest problems. Bipolar, all of that. What you have are parents who are emotionally dysregulated, who never did the work. The first 7 years of life, they're training their children. They're dumping their emotional condition into them. And so these children wake up and they've been conditioned because their parents dumped so much depression and they had so much chaos emotionally. The child becomes bipolar. They bounce between extremes. Here's the other thing is most psychologists and psychiatrists that diagnose bipolar, most of it's not even true. It's codependence. But remember, they go to school to give you a label so they can give you drugs. I can't tell you how many clients I've had who are so-called bipolar and depressive. And as soon as I taught them this process, it was gone in weeks. This is what I get angry. And I need to own. I'm going to fall back into my own childhood trauma. Okay. So please, here's what I want all of you to do right now. And this for HSPs and empaths and those who don't quite believe what I'm saying. I want to give you a solution. I want you to think of some sort of container you can put over yourself. There's a couple things. It needs to be thick enough that words and emotions can't come through. It needs some sort of door to allow truth in. All right. But if something doesn't match your reality, it can bounce off. So you don't have to accept my reality or my truth. If you think I'm wrong, don't let it in. Okay. You only let in what you feel is truth to you. So when I teach, this is the beginning to learn an internal boundary that empaths and HSPs don't have. So they don't have no way to contain themselves from themselves or from others. So I've had clients, they think of a glass jar with a door. Some have thought of a balloon. All right. Others have thought of Star Trek, beam me up, Scotty. So when somebody's acting dysregular, they're fuzzy, right? And they just beam up out of it. For me, what I always did was when I learned how to do this, and my ex-wife was physically and verbally abusive. And so I would pull over, I'd get to the house to pick up the kids 15 to 30 minutes early, and I would practice like visually, most of all, feeling, not just seeing. Seeing isn't, visualization isn't what you want. You want feelization. You want to feel what you want to become. And so I would feel myself holding my heart out here. I'd sit there with my eyes closed for a while until I could open my eyes. Pardon me, I just got this cold today. Until I could feel with my eyes open that I'm holding my heart out here. And I'd go walk to the door, arms by my side, but I literally felt like I was standing like this. I'd open the door, there'd always be some really rude, awful comment, and it would just glide right through me. I'd sit there and I'd go, oh, she doesn't know. My heart's over here. It can't get me. Now, if she said something that was truth, kids have this, I'd grab it and I'd throw it over to my heart. I'd let that in. It's truth. All right. So that's what I did. Other people, I had one client, this is cool. They made a castle with a moat and a drawbridge. So the castle and the moat, complete protection from anyone's words or actions. But truth could come in. Others have used the Quran. Another one used the Bible. I don't care what you use, but you need to start creating a container to house you. All right. So I'm asking all of you right now, create something like that for yourself. Fortify yourself, because I'm about to allow myself to become emotionally, I'm not going to be present as an adult. I'm not going to be mature and moderate. I'm going to allow my childhood trauma from the past to come out and speak. Okay. And express anger. And so when I read these comments of what do you say about bipolar and depression, I get really pissed off, because our medical community signs an oath to do no harm, but they are not educated correctly. Everything is emotion-based. They're not taught that. They're not taught how to heal any of this stuff. Our doctors, our psychiatrists, psychologists, they are horrifically undereducated, wrongly educated, and it's killing people. Ever since they started coming up with these diagnoses, all of our society has gotten sicker and worse, because they're dumping chemicals into people that don't help them. Now, I'm not saying you should never take pills. Some people have been through so much trauma and so much codependence that the pill can mitigate some of the emotional dysregulation they're experiencing. It can be a great place to start. So I want to say it again. I am not telling anyone to get off their medication. I'm not telling anyone they should never take medication or that medication is bad. What I am saying is, in almost all cases, medication is not your best option. It is treating the symptoms. It's not treating the cause. If you want to get out of these conditions, you need emotional authenticity. You need to heal the childhood trauma from your past. You need to do codependence recovery work. And so here's why I get angry. And this is why it's me projecting my trauma onto the world when I get all fired up. What killed my father was denial and self-deception. I could be holding up this book, and if my father didn't want to be wrong, he would tell me it's a dollar bill. Like, it's not like that. I'm using hyperbole just as just to show you that my father was beat to death as a kid. My father couldn't be wrong. That was the emotional simulation concept and definition he was raised with. And so my father could never be wrong. And so as a child, I had a natural ability, because of the lack of internal boundaries, I was able to see what was going on in everybody, and I saw the world from a different place. I could start to figure, I was figuring out what was going on before I knew any of this. I'd done any research. And so when I'd speak, because it went against everybody in the house, the whole house would shut me down. And so the reason I get so angry when I read comments like that is what I have done. And I want to see whose name it was. It wasn't Adam. It was Bob. Bob. So Bob, I'm telling all of this to make amends to you, to take, see, I'm going to model what it looks like to live in truth, take responsibility, and do the healing work. So the truth is, my anger and frustration over your comment isn't about you. I'm talking to my father because my father refused to hear truth. And so when I get fired up, I am reliving my childhood trauma. I am in that moment not taking responsibility. I am pretty much between 3 and 10 years, well, 3 to 18 years old. It's like the whole childhood. I still haven't, even though I've taken responsibility and done a tremendous amount of healing work, I haven't released it all. And that's okay. I can forgive myself. I'm human. I'm limited. I'm perfectly imperfect. We'll never totally conquer everything, but the goal is to take ownership of it, like I'm doing with you, Bob, and going, look, this is the best recovery I have right now. I want to yell and scream at you and anyone else who, after I've laid out all of this proof, still wants to be in denial. I'm like literally, I'm holding this back because right now, Bob, you're my father. Like, you own me, Bob. Literally, I'm just a child. And you have total control over me emotionally. I've lost internal boundaries and containment because my codependence is showing up and going, but Bob, you need to believe me. You need to accept my truth. And if you don't accept my truth, I am worthless. I am useless. I am nothing. All right. That's what's I'm just being honest. That's what's happening inside of me. I'm sure there are other comments where people don't agree with me. And I will, as soon as I read it, I know I'm going to get triggered with the exact same thing. I'm going to want to get angry, yell and scream, and I'm going to make you my father. And I basically this is why it's codependent. I have now made you my God. Nobody ever makes us feel anything, ever, ever, ever. That's what you'll learn when you do this. All you're ever doing is making a choice within inside yourself to create a construction of an emotion that's harmful to you. Why? Because you learned to do that in childhood. It's unhealed trauma. And it's not that you become perfect at never experiencing it again, but you do get into truth and reality that you're making yourself experience it. And so I have to do this. I have to be vulnerable about it. That right now, Bob, I have made you my God. You own me. Like I am worshiping at the feet of Bob. I need to prove to you, I need your approval. Like I have no worth unless you agree with me or anyone else, that wants to argue with me. That's what codependence is. I am dependent upon you accepting my version of reality. That means that's one of the 5 core symptoms of codependence, out of touch with reality. And the way I've dropped out of reality is I've just made you responsible for accepting my version of reality. You don't have to accept my version of reality. You get to have your own. Okay. So when you watch any of my videos and you see me get fired up, what you're experiencing is me in my codependence, in my perfect imperfections, my childhood trauma that I'm still working on. It'll never go away completely. There are certain aspects that I just don't deal with anymore. I'm so good at it. I've just recovered from it. Other things, I got more work to do. But see, because I live in truth, responsibility, healing, and forgiveness, I can forgive myself for being imperfect and that I still have healing to do. I can love myself. And that's the reconnection to the authentic self, is even when I'm severely dysfunctional, like I have been with Bob here and dropped in, made him my God. Our authentic self knows at all times, whether we are being perfect or imperfect, that we always have value and worth. And so just because Bob owns me right now, I still have value and worth. I don't have to be perfect to be valuable and worthy. I've learned how to do that. I've learned to accept. I no longer allow my parents induced shame. And that's what Dr. Elaine Aaron is stuck in, is shame. And no offense, Bob, that's what you're stuck in, is wait a minute, I can't allow this truth in because that means I'm bad. And that assaults my inherent value and worth. That's what the left hemisphere, the left hemisphere is a detachment from the authentic self. It doesn't experience inherent value and worth. Our right hemisphere does. And so the people, even though I've laid out the scientific proof of exactly what's going on, those that can't accept it, that's proof they're detached from their authentic self. They don't feel the experience of their inherent value and worth because they're like, no, I can't be wrong. I can't let this go. I have to hold on to this because I heard over here it's this way. Well, I can't accept this new truth. And you'll learn, if you decide to pick up my book, you'll learn what, on a much deeper level, exactly what's going on. And if you choose to, how to address it. Okay. All right. My gosh, there's a lot of comments here. Please give examples of internal boundaries. Great job, Sharon. That's a great question. I just did it. I just showed it. Did you see how I took complete ownership? Even as I was emotionally dysregulated, I could do it from a mature and moderate position. And what I did was I was totally, brutally honest and vulnerable. That's an internal boundary. If I didn't have internal boundaries, I would have yelled and screamed. I would have dismissed Bob. I wouldn't have owned. You know, you can tell you've lost internal boundaries when you want to play the victim and blame somebody else. I could easily talk. I could accept Bob's reality. That's the way he wants to view the world. He gets to. This is how I view the world. And I could admit to Bob, look, your view of the world triggers me to want to lose my internal boundaries. All right. But I was able to express myself while staying contained. At most of it, I was laughing and smiling, right? I was contained. I was in an adult state. A lack of internal boundaries would have been, I'd have just gone off. You blah, 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 and this is blah, 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 blah. You know, you've seen all of that. That's the lack of internal boundaries. All right. Here's another example of internal boundaries. I didn't tell Bob that he had to accept what I think, feel, and believe. Whenever you tell somebody what they should do, what they should think, or what they should believe, you have lost internal boundaries. You have now become verbally abusive. So think of the cancel culture. How everyone's going around, oh, I'm triggered this, I'm triggered that, and don't say this, and call me this pronoun, and all of that. Those are examples of people who are in severe codependence, who have absolutely no internal boundaries. And they've placed the whole world, every person out there is now their God. Those people own them. They don't want to take responsibility for, remember, we make our own emotions. We learned them in childhood. They don't want to take responsibility. And most of them, they just don't know. They don't know that they haven't been educated. This is what's happening to them. Okay. But our society keeps promoting this, our society, and this is part of how emotions get made. Right now, our society is completely celebrating and promoting the victim position. And so everyone's choosing to be a victim. There are all these victim groups everywhere. And you can't say or do this because you trigger me. That's a complete lack of internal boundaries. You don't trigger me unless I allow you. And so you saw, I admitted to Bob that I was losing my internal boundaries. But in the process, I modeled what the recovery process is and what regathering your internal boundaries looks like. And so I was able to pull myself back, stay contained, not infect Bob, allow him to have his reality while I shared mine from a mature and moderate place with no yelling or screaming. And I didn't demand that he change. Okay. Now I did share my reality because he's placed a question. He asked me, he invited me in and wanted me to share my reality about his information or his belief about something. Well, almost all of us, people tell us about their day and we immediately go, well, why didn't you do that? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? What were you thinking? That's a complete lack of internal boundaries. That's actually a definition of verbal abuse. When you tell people what they should do unless they've invited you in. I walk you through that in my book, exactly how to stay contained. Here's, I'm going to give you a really easy way to think about this. I actually do. I want to pull it up. I want to read it to you because I think it comes across much better in reading than even when I say it out loud. I just really like the way I wrote it. And so I think, just give me a second here. Let me find it. Oh my gosh, there's so many pages in here. There it is. Okay. Page 105. All right. This will give you an idea of what boundaries look like. The need for codependence recovery, the basic of boundaries. For those caught in the codependent dynamic of taking, so what we were describing is taking people's inventory, telling them what they should think, feel, believe, or do. So all of the cancel culture, political correct people, they're taking people's inventory. All right. That's severe codependence. All right. It's also verbal abuse when you try and tell people what they should think, feel, do, or believe. Okay. So for those caught in the codependent dynamic of taking people's inventory, I want to provide an easy to understand framework of healthy boundaries. Have you ever watched two people playing tennis? Both stand on either side of the court, alternating between serving and returning, and neither crosses the net to do the work of hitting the ball for the other or offer suggestions or advice on how they should play tennis. Boundaries operate in the same manner. The net is the boundary. We are two distinct individuals whose courts comprise our own morals, values, needs, wants, negotiables, and non negotiables. Everything on my side of the court is my responsibility. I can decide if and how I want to play and what shots I want to hit. Your side of the court and how you choose to play is none of my business. Do you see? All the politically correct people, they have jumped the net. They think everyone else's life is their business. That's severe codependence. That's a severe lack of internal boundaries and even external boundaries. Okay. We act without boundaries whenever we tell somebody what they should feel, think, do, or believe. We have hopped over the net and are trying to do the work of living for them or controlling how they live. We are taking their inventory. Conversely, this is what empaths, HSPs, those who, oh, the narcissist made me do. No, what's happened is the narcissist has jumped over the net and we didn't say no. We didn't set the boundary. That's our responsibility. And this is how, the victim culture doesn't take responsibility. They just go, well, there's nothing I can do. No, that's a lie. That's acting without internal boundaries. And so the empath HSP who says, oh, there's nothing I can do. No, that's a lie. That's a child position. That's saying they're defenseless. Well, you're an adult. No, you can go learn codependence recovery. You can learn to change your emotions and emotional. There's all of these things you can do. But when you choose to allow a person to jump over the net and don't set the boundary, they're not responsible for that. And see, that's what our victim culture and our cancel culture is teaching everyone to do, is to be codependent and to play the victim. As you can see, it doesn't work. Just look at society. Are any of those conditions getting better? No, they're just skyrocketing. And so as they create their own victim status, they now create a victim over here who then needs victim status. Like everyone just keeps reaching for victim status. All right. So what it is it's two children racing to the bottom saying, I won't even listen to you until you validate my victimhood. And the other one going, well, no. I'm not going to validate your victimhood because mine's more important. No, mine's more important. No, mine's more important. So that's why this cancel culture and victim, syndrome that we're going through never works, because both are children demanding that the other one validate their victimhood above theirs. Well, we're going to make our victimhood the most important one. And so I'm not even going to listen to yours until you validate mine. That's a lack of boundaries. Okay. Conversely, if we allow them to hop the net and do the same to us, we are responsible for continuing to play with them on our side of the court and allowing them to influence how we live. By not saying no, we are responsible for allowing them to take our inventory. When a person sends over a booming serve of toxicity, we get to choose if we want to return the shot. We can join in the toxicity or allow it to pass us by. We do that by I hold my heart out. You might use a container. I'm just going to let the booming serve of toxicity bounce off of me. They get to have their reality. They get to play tennis any way they want and look at the world any way they want. It's none of my business. I'm on my side. I play the game different. I wouldn't serve that way. I wouldn't hit my backhand that way. I'd hit a cut. I wouldn't come over to whatever it is. You get to decide, and so do they. Okay? So we can join in the toxicity or allow it to pass us by. Their toxicity only affects us if we choose to return the serve. So when somebody throws something we think is slanderous or awful, we get to decide, is it true? Am I blankety blank, blank, blank? Yeah, it doesn't fit my reality. I have my container on. I have my internal boundaries. I check. They make the assault. The cancel culture warrior goes, you're victimizing me. Like I'm sure some HSPs or empaths are going to say, oh my God, I'm just the worst person in the world. I'll listen to that. My heart's going to be out here. I'll consider and I go, well, wait a minute. I've been studying this stuff for a long time. The research is clear. I'm actually liberating them from pain. I'm offering them a solution. My truth is different than theirs. My reality is different than theirs. So I don't need to argue with them. They get to have their truth. I'm not going to return what to me in my reality is a booming serve of toxicity. I will retain my internal boundaries. I'll let them have theirs. Big deal. So they think different. It's like, I guess, would you hate somebody because they like pepperoni on their pizza and you like mushrooms? No, you just go, pepperoni. Interesting. Like, who cares? We only care if we have unhealed childhood trauma and we're stuck as codependent. The proof that you have both is that you get fired up. It means you're stuck in your childhood pain from the past and the codependency you learned in childhood. So when you get fired up by other people's comments, just like I had to admit about Bob, my reaction to Bob and his question was not about Bob. It was about my unhealed pain and my codependence. I got into truth and I kept myself contained. I stayed on my side of the net and I spoke the truth and I returned. Bob sent over a serve and I returned it in what felt like to me, I don't know what Bob's reality is. He may have a completely different interpretation of how I played the shot back, but I played the shot back in what to me was a very loving, appropriate manner. It was in between the lines. It wasn't aggressive. It took ownership. It allowed for the game to continue. If Bob wants to return something, as long as he's not toxic, because to me, I didn't, take his question as toxic. It was very just, hey, matter of fact, if it turned toxic, I get to decide. Am I going to respond to that? I don't. I just go, there goes Bob. Okay, let's see who else wants to talk. All right. So a person deep in codependence will return every serve and try and play out every point, even to their detriment. Most will take it a step further by hopping over the net, trying to correct the other person and telling them how they should play their game and what attitude and feelings they should bring to it, thus abandoning their own. Players learn to break the rules of tennis because their parents modeled this game of codependence for them. Therefore, they need to become the parents they never had and learn the skills and tools of proper tennis/boundaries to reclaim their authentic selves. So there's a basic understanding. Obviously, this is the next piece of help I want to offer you. If you identify as an HSP, empath, and even if you don't, these 3 books should be mandatory reading by every single adult on the planet. They are that important. Pia Mellody, what she has created, it's so sad to me that very few people know about her, because most people just think about the codependent as the weak, wimpy, disempowered. There are two codependents. There is the typical disempowered, but there's the polar opposite, the falsely empowered. What we all think are healthy, normal, successful people, those are the falsely empowered. They're severely codependent. If you don't know Pia Mellody's understanding of codependence, and this is what's sad, virtually no coaches, virtually no therapists know anything about this. And yet they're teaching codependence recovery. If you don't know Pia Mellody's model, in my reality, which doesn't make me right, it makes me right for me, you don't know codependence. You are doing a disservice to your clients. And so I beg all of you, especially it doesn't matter if you're HSP or empath, every adult should not be allowed to go through life without reading this book. It is that important. Start with this one. You will be blown. You will get into truth of how traumatic your childhood was. You go, wow, I had no idea. I thought that was normal and that was loving. It'll start breaking that denial that your left hemisphere is stuck in. And it's done lovingly. It's not disparagingly. She just points out, hey, this is abuse. This is trauma. And this is what we all suffer. None of us are immune from it. Start with that. The next book of hers, again, I don't believe any person should be allowed to go on a date ever without reading this book, Facing Love Addiction. You will learn, most people are calling people narcissists. They're not. They're falsely empowered, love-avoidant codependents. When you read this, you're going to go, wow, I've been calling that guy a narcissist, that woman a narcissist. She's not a narcissist. She's a severely falsely empowered, disempowered codependent operating either love addict, love avoidant. Look, narcissism is so small, but it's such a catchphrase. And then the way the social media algorithms are set up, they're all designed to push negative disinformation, minimum 6 times more than truth. And so I've talked about all of this stuff for years. Those videos, they never get played. If I just put narcissism in the title of the video, you guys watch it. It's fascinating how it works. I have thousands of videos and only a small select have ever been promoted by the social media companies, because do you see why? Remember what the left hemisphere doesn't want to do? It doesn't want to take responsibility. It wants to play the victim. And so that's part of why narcissism is so popular, because now I'm the victim. I don't have to look at my codependence, my love addiction, my love avoidance. I don't have to look at my childhood trauma. I get to blame it on them. I'm an empath, HSP. Like, our left hemisphere is just brilliant. It's setting up all of these victim dynamics, and not taking responsibility. It's all through culture. And that my book shows you that, like, literally. Denial and self-deception is the single greatest killer on the planet today. Everything. If you aren't recovering in your life, if you aren't achieving what you want, it's because you're in self-deception and you don't know it. And no one's taught you the process to see it. Well, I know that's scary. And your left hemisphere is going to go, oh, no, I don't want to take responsibility. I don't want to be it to me. It's my ex. It's the so-and-so. It's the government. It's this. No, it's us. So when you're ready, these books are waiting for you. So those are the first two. Now, for, was it Sharon? And Sharon, I'll tell you in a second how you can donate. This book, her third book, The Intimacy Factor, she gives real life examples of what it looks like to set boundaries, how to enact them, how to, like, I teach a version, a bit more advanced version of her confrontation model. Hers is, it's great. I developed it much deeper. And when you use, and she doesn't quite go into it in here. It's implied in the examples she gives. And learning to talk to somebody this way, I'll just warn you, you're going to go, this is weird. And you know why? Because she's modeling maturity and moderation, and we're all stuck in childhood. And so we're like, that's a weird way to talk to somebody. Yeah, because we all talk to people like children. stuck as codependent victims instead of people who taken responsibility, done the healing work, and know how to talk to somebody and have a disagreement with maturity and moderation. So please, those are key. Okay, Sharon asked, how do we donate? Sharon, do you see down at the bottom, it says where the chat is, there's a little smiley face. To the right of that, there's a $sign. Just click that $sign and you can donate whatever you want. You know, anybody, if this presentation is helping anybody, you know, and you want to, chip in, that would be great. If you have a certain question and you're like, or comment or something, you want to make sure I catch it, use that and I'll, use the donate button and I will make sure I answer your question. Okay. Let's see. The Cinnamon Nerd says, but you are very wise too. Thank you very much. I've had to do it. As you can see, I've had to do a lot of recovery work. And so in the process, I've learned a thing or two. Gosh, there's so much to go through here. Wow. Oh, gosh, I feel terrible. Oh my gosh, I didn't even see this up here. Sharon already donated $20. Thank you, Sharon. Sorry, guys. I had no idea there was so much here. I have to go to the top. I'm going to stop teaching and I'm going to start going through as much of this as I can because I want to acknowledge, my gosh, how many people have shown up? It was hundreds earlier. I don't know how many are left now, but I really appreciate you tuning in. So let's see. Angie girl, good to see you. Bonnie, got it. Yes, I was picking up on the transfer. Good. Cindy, I had zero boundaries. Bob, already responded to you. Sharon, I gave you the examples of boundaries. Adam, took 39 years to learn boundaries. Mary, fantastic book. Thanks. I'll look at that. I'm assuming you mean my book. No, you probably mean Pia. Well, I don't know. I've offered 5 different books. They're all wonderful. I suggest you pick up all of them. Now, you can find all of them on my website. Go to the resources tab, recommended reading. All of the things, well, not all, many of the books that I've, had to lean on for my recovery are listed there. And so I suggest all of the books, but tonight for these dynamics, I'm highly suggesting those. All right. Mary R says, this explains everything. Yes, it does. See, that's how I felt. When I found out how much deception I was in and how I was approaching the world wrong, I didn't feel shame about it. I kind of felt angry. Like, why aren't people teaching this? I was so excited to find out I was wrong. Most people can't stand it. That left hemisphere, that denial is so severe. They want to argue and fight and hold on. And I'm really blessed. I'm the opposite. I love to be shown where I'm false. Solitary Mind retracted a message. I'm good for you. I love that, setting a boundary for yourself. I love that. Oh, what did I miss here? Deborah says, here now. Hi, Deborah. Cindy, this is deep. Yes, thank you. It is. This explains everything. Mary, yes, agree. What did you take the pills for? I took pills. God, there was a time I was on beta blockers. I was on antidepressants. I was taking like 5, 6 different medications. Do you guys know who Dr. Amen is? The Amen Clinic? It's just a pill factory. They've just flooded me with pills. It's really upset me. Because I read all of his stuff and he talks about childhood trauma. And, he's like, yeah, we don't, in all of his stuff, he's like, yeah, we don't push pills. And as soon as I got there, that's all they did. Like literally, I walked out of there. I think it was 5 different prescriptions. They're just a pill factory. I was really upset. But see, I didn't have any boundaries. I couldn't say no. It was the best I could do at the time. But I can't remember the names of all of them. I just remember there were 5 of them. Who just gave $5? I see somebody. Gosh, I wish I knew how to do this. It says R. I'm not quite sure who R is. You're setting the cat amongst the pigeons with this one, Kenny. All the pigeons are confused and think they're peacocks, so they need the cat released to bring them back to earth. That's one way of looking at it. There's so much more to this than you realize when you're stating it's only a small part of the reality of consciousness and one of many possibilities. I'm not sure. Lee, I'm assuming you disagree with my reality. I'm not positive. I'm glad that you disagree. Let's see. Hi, Krista. Good to see you too. A quiet soul is saying they couldn't experience putting their head underwater. Bonnie, I'm not for letting narcissists off the hook. I am for internal boundaries. That's great. Let's see here. I'm trying to see if anyone has a question. Pushing people to adopt a victim mindset is the best way to control them. Yes, that's part of why it's being promoted everywhere. Is it buys votes, it buys attention, it buys a lot. It works very well when you condone and support the victim position. Because do you see why people play the victim? It makes everybody else their parent. They never have to do the recovery work. They get to stay the hurt child in the hopes that you'll be the father and mother they never had. It's a wonderful strategy. I don't blame them. I did it for, look, do you know how I became an expert in all this? Because I did all of these techniques. These are all the things I've had to confront in myself. I don't teach anything I haven't confronted. And so that's why I figured all this stuff out, is I had to figure out in me. That's what's unique about my coaching is I spent 30 years literally gutting myself before I ever worked with a client. That's unheard of. Almost everybody comes out of school and their own childhood trauma unhealed, and they treat people. They've never, some do the work while they're treating people. Most never do the work. And so I spent decades working on me and figuring out how all of these processes worked in me first before I ever started working on somebody else. So that's why I'm never disparaging anyone. I did the same thing Dr. Aaron did, and it's just part of the process. Yes, yeah, it's been my life experience. Almost all illness and disease is childhood trauma. I've worked with countless people who've been sick, from cancer to all these different diseases. I talk about those in my videos and books. As soon as we deal with the childhood trauma, the condition goes away. It's painfully obvious. I mean, even the cancer research shows that the most effective cancer treatment is emotional work, not the billions we spent on chemo and pills. But again, who runs medicine? Oh, somebody just donate. $9.99. Leslie did. This makes sense. Past adopted foster care, crappy adoptive father. You're saying that I avoid certain people, even TV shows, if emotionally attached or detect dishonest people. Is my past coming up? Yes, that's exactly it, Leslie. Yeah, beautifully done. Well done. I'm glad. That makes me feel better that I communicated in a way that you could hear it. Great job. I don't know. It says, let's celebrate it. How do I celebrate it? I think I just hearted it. Do I balloon it? Put user, hi? No, I don't know. Leslie, I'm trying to celebrate you. I guess I got to learn how to celebrate people on here. But somebody else gave $5. I have to find that. Where is it? Oh, Ruthesh. Thank you, Ruthesh. Let's see. Let's heart you too. Celebrate there. So everyone celebrate Leslie, Ruthesh, and oh gosh, I forget. Sharon. Those three all made contributions. Thank you so much for your support. Isabella, I just went through a really long explanation of setting boundaries. Or no, I didn't really set boundaries. I didn't do that. You're right. How do we set boundaries? It depends what boundary we're talking about. If it's a physical boundary, like there are certain people that I don't want to be hugged by. And so you know how we always get to set our physical boundary, how close we allow somebody. And a lot of people are huggers. Well, I've been in situations where, I read people very well. And so when somebody comes towards me and I can recognize that they're most likely abusive people, I put my arm out like this, like an arrow. Like it doesn't move. And they're like, and I just, hi, nice to meet you. like you ain't hugging me. No, I'm setting a boundary and I'm smiling the whole time. Hi, it's nice to meet you. But I will not shrink this in. I will not let you break my physical boundary. Nobody breaks our boundaries unless we allow them to. And so I just set that arm right there. All right. So that's one way to set a physical boundary. Internal boundaries or relationship boundaries, that's the art of saying no. And so usually that requires asking our need, stating our needs and wants, and either gathering information or making a request. So that might go something like this of, I'm trying to think of something. Oh, let's say I was throwing a dinner party in my house, and I stepped outside and noticed somebody was smoking pot. Well, I don't allow drugs in my house. I know everyone thinks pot is healthy. It's so bad for you. It's horrific. All the studies, it's just so funny how they've turned it into this health food. It's the greatest marketing ever. This stuff is terrible for you. I mean, there's this like 0.003% of people literally on death, like where it can, soften their pain. But everybody else, oh, anxiety. It increases anxiety through the roof. Non-addictive, my butt. Like, anyway, it's just fascinating how we're all looking for a magic pill. Our left hemisphere is looking for a magic pill that makes us the victim so we don't have to do childhood trauma and codependence recovery work. And pot's the latest one. So if I had a dinner party and I walked out and somebody was smoking pot, I just come up and I go, hi, I know that you're not aware of this, but I don't allow drugs in my house. So would you be willing to put that out for me? And if you could just refrain from doing that while you're at my house, you're welcome to do whatever you want at home, but please not here. I just asked for my needs and wants. I'd set the boundary. And if they go, well, what's the big deal? And I'm like, that's a great question. What is the big deal? I'm not sure that I'm willing to have that discussion right now. I just know that for me, this is a big deal. So does it work for you to not smoke pot in my house? If not, you're welcome to leave. Which one works best for you? Do you see? I give them choice. I'm not asking you to change. I'm making a request for my need and want. Would you please stop? I'm asking, does it work for you? But if not, you're welcome to leave. These are your two choices. This is how you parent kids too. And you don't yell and scream at them what to do. You offer them choices within a set of boundaries that work for you. So what works for me is you can either refrain and stay, or if you want to continue, you can leave. I've set the boundaries of what I'm willing to tolerate, and I've given you two options. Which do you choose? Well, I don't know why it's such a big deal. Why can't I just smoke a joint? Why are you getting so upset about it? Okay, so what I hear for you is that smoking pot is very important to you. I think that's great. I'm just going to ask you to leave because I don't allow that in my house, and I don't want to interrupt your pot smoking. So you're more than welcome to do that elsewhere. And if you're making me leave? Actually, no, you've made the choice. I've given you two options. You're welcome to stay under these conditions. You've chosen those conditions don't work for you. I think that's great. I want you to do what's best for me, best for you. But since you've chosen not to fit that condition, that means you've chosen to leave. And so I'm allowing you to leave. Do you see? I won't take responsibility for their choice. That's what, everybody does. They play the victim. You're making me. No, I'm not. I just gave you an option. You don't want to change your behavior. And now you want me to take responsibility for your inability to change your behavior. I'm exercising an internal boundary and setting an external boundary. And so he's trying to gaslight me and make me responsible. And I'm like, oh, yeah. And then if he kept, I'd say, okay, I've asked twice now. If you refuse, I might have to move to other options. So I'm just going to ask one last time. Would you please leave? And if that point they hesitated again, I'd say, okay, this no longer works for me. I'm going to find a solution that does. And I would go inside and I'd call the police. It's what I do. I don't mess around. You've got to learn to say no. And I know a lot of you, oh my God, that's so severe. Well, what that tells me is how severe your childhood trauma was. Because I was that person who couldn't do that. That's why I got abused in my first relationship. Because I could not say no. I could not stand up to abuse. That person is abusing me. This is my house. And you want to tell me what I can have in my house? That's abuse. I never told them what they needed to do. I asked them, I gave them options. This damn cold, pardon me. And so that's an example of a verbal abuser. Well, I call the police on people who are verbally abusive. I don't mess around. Another example is if I'm at a social setting and any woman, sometimes just punch in the arm, I will not let any woman ever lay a hand on me, even if it's joking. And I don't care if it's public or not. I mean, I was abused by a woman. In our culture, look, every TV show, every commercial, every movie, we are training women to be completely physically and verbally abusive to men. It's condoned. Look at every commercial. The man's a total idiot. Only the woman is smart. Only the woman has an answer. The man's a buffoon. That's what we did back in the 60s to women. They've just flipped the script. Now they're the abusers, and somehow it's okay. Well, if it wasn't okay then, it's not okay now. Like when men were the abusers and belittled women, that was a problem. Well, this is a problem. And since I've been abused by a woman, if any woman touches me in even jokingly a physical manner, I'm like, look, I don't allow any person, especially woman, to ever use any type of physical force against me, whether it's joking or not. I ask that you never do that again. Like I'm like, I don't mess around with boundaries because I got beat up by a woman. Like I got beat up as a kid. My life was miserable. So I don't mess around. I set boundaries. And I know that whenever I'm afraid to, that's because I'm reliving childhood trauma. Anybody who's afraid to set boundaries or feels guilty or thinks they're being mean, all that tells me is you have a lot of codependence recovery and a lot of childhood trauma recovery in front of you to reclaim your authentic self so you can protect yourself. Nobody is allowed to touch us unless we give them permission in any way, and nobody is allowed to tell us what we should think, feel, believe, or do unless we give them permission to. If they do either of those things, they are abusers. I do not allow people to abuse me. I'm in control of that. Nobody abuses us unless we allow it. All right. And the only reason it happens to us is because we're all raised codependently and experience childhood trauma. It becomes normalized in the first 7 years of life. And so then as an adult, we pick a partner and it mirrors the exact same childhood trauma. You don't end up with an abusive partner unless your childhood was abusive. Our adult relationships, the dysfunction in our adult relationships mirror the dysfunction in our childhood relationship. If all you experience are dysfunctional relationships, friendships, whatever they may be, that means you went through a lot. You have a lot of childhood trauma to heal and recover from. Okay. Oh goodness. Thank you for the compliment. It's in Chinese, so I don't know what that is. No, I am single. Can I marry you? That's actually kind of cute. I don't know you. I don't know if you can marry me. Let's see. Ouch, that hits home. Yeah, truth hits home. Our left hemisphere doesn't like truth. It likes denial. It does not. It's like, that's why we jolt. A lot of people jolt at what I'm talking about because our society condones denial and self-deception and victim. And I don't, because I almost lost my life. And I see, and every client, every person that's struggling in life, it's because society and parents have taught them that codependence, childhood trauma, and playing the victim are the right way to live. It's not. And I'm fighting against that. Faith asks, what about a narcissist husband that won't stop touching me in a healthy way? How do I approach it? When I ask him not to, he says he can, or he will just stop when he knows it doesn't bother me. Well, again, this is boundaries. So I would look at, if I don't want someone touching me, what can I control? I can control where I sleep. If I didn't want my partner touching me and I asked them, I made a request and they chose to keep touching me, my next step would be to move to sleep in a different room. If they came in the room and did it, then I'd put a lock on the door. If they broke the door down, I'd call the police. In other words, Faith, you're wanting him to change. And this is why the victim culture never works. It's always looking at the narcissist or the other one as the problem. They're not the problem. They are the possibility. Because when I stop playing the victim and stop looking at them and go, okay, what are my options? Remember, truth. Nobody touches me. Nobody abuses me unless I don't take responsibility for myself. So if I don't want somebody touching me, I need to go learn how to become an expert at setting boundaries. I need to put a plan in place to protect myself. And if that means I even need to go as far as moving out or filing a restraining order or asking for a divorce. If I don't want to be touched and somebody's touching me, and all you've ever done is say, stop, you haven't done enough. You have to keep going. You have to set boundaries. Like, I know for me, if I had said that and somebody did it once or twice, the doors would be changed. They would not be allowed in the house the next day. I would already go talk to a lawyer and get it all set up. I'd lock them out. Like, I don't mess around. And so you get to decide. And so this is what I mean is people won't take responsibility because most likely, Faith, I'm making this up, Faith. None of this might be true. But in my experience, this is because of our victim culture. This is probably what's happened. You probably have a bunch of girlfriends or people on social media where you post about this all the time. And then they join you, go, oh my God, you poor thing. Or, oh yeah, mine too. And so you're getting all of this attention from not fixing the problem. And that's the payoff, is I get to be the victim. I get to blame them and say what a terrible person they are. Well, that's the death of all of us. And that's what I used to do. And I learned that doesn't work. And so if I don't like somebody's behavior, it's my job to look at what can I control and then take responsibility for that, put a plan in place and enact that plan. Okay? Thanks, Faith. All right. I care about my partner. I think I treat him like my mother treated me as a child. Good for you that you're looking to change, Monique. That takes guts. Apocalypsa, good to see you from Croatia. Monique, good to see you from Canada. I don't know. Yasa Maiden 144,000. Isn't there one phrase that you can shut them down? I'm not exactly sure what that means. A lot of people are looking for solutions to shut down narcissists. Like, that's a power. Do you see how manipulative that is? How narcissistic that is? All the people who want to figure out the narcissist and shut them down. I'm not saying that's what your question was. It wasn't clear. I'm taking part of that question and recognizing what a lot of people do. They want these solutions to make the narcissist pay. Do you realize how narcissistic that is? How manipulative and controlling that is? Because do you remember the analogy of tennis? You've jumped over the net. You're trying to figure them out. You're taking their inventory. Instead, I set boundaries and I leave. I don't play with abusers. And so anyone who wants to play with a narcissist and figure them out, they're actively choosing to learn the game of tennis abuse where both abuse each other. And a lot of coaches and people in the narcissist realm are teaching people to do that. It's so toxic. So, but maybe that works for you. I mean, there's so many payoffs from staying the victim and playing that toxic game. But it doesn't work in my reality. So I don't advocate it. And I won't give you a phrase because you're victimizing yourself and them when you do that. So, Jeanette. Oh, hey, Jeanette. Thanks for the donation. I really appreciate that. That's very. Do you have a question in there? Says Jeanette Healthy. Well, I like that. Thank you. I'm glad you're getting something from this live. Let's see. Boundaries. Totally agree, Kenny. No one should ever hit someone else. Yesha Maiden, if you're saying thank you for your input, so what do you suggest? If someone's being abusive, leave, set boundaries, call the police. Like there's a process. If you purchase my first book, Your Journey to Success, or if you sign up for my classes, I give you the process to learn how to say no and set boundaries. That would be my suggestion. It's too long. Here's some of the problem with this live stream. This is what I've noticed since doing this, is some of the questions to give you complete solutions would take me 2 hours. That's why I have private sessions. That's why I created the classes, is, I can't give you the complete solution. And so I try and give you basic tidbits to get started. But at some point, look, this just has to be said. You will not recover for free. That's one of the biggest traps in the whole personal development thing, is everybody wants to recover for free. In other words, they just want to watch videos. They want free downloads, free classes. You won't get recovery. It requires an investment. You have to learn the full process. And you also have to invest in your time, choosing every day to do the work. Just watching videos, just asking questions isn't enough. Think of it. If you want to learn a new language, would you just take a 15-day free trial? You learn a couple words, maybe a couple phrases, but you don't know how to speak Finnish or Japanese. You have to spend some time. You're going to have to spend some years. You're actually going to have to travel there and learn how to speak it. Like, it's the same thing with recovery. You're going to have to get past the 15-day free trial. You got to commit and go, no, I want to learn this. I mean, that's the reason I know this stuff, is I got fascinated with it. I finally started to feel better. All of a sudden, my life started to work. And then I found out I had a gift at it, and I loved doing it. And so it became a career. I don't know that, maybe you're supposed to do this too. I don't know, but I know this: if you want to recover, you have to make a commitment to yourself. You have to choose yourself. Okay. Let me scroll up and see who I missed. Leslie, I got. Ritesh, Adam. Who am I? Let's see here. Who is asking other questions? I know this is the worst part of a live stream, is when we're sitting here looking for questions. How can you manage work bullies as an adult? That's from Penny. Great question, Penny. You're not going to like the answer. Well, there are a couple layers to this. First of all, in a job, there's an unwritten contract that we sign that, at least with our boss, they are always right, unless they break the law or do something abusive. Okay. Bullying, most bullying doesn't rise to criminal abuse. It's hurtful and annoying. And look, that's codependent skills, and all of that won't work because it's a power dynamic. He or she is always right. There's not an equal exchange. And that's why, there's not much you can do. The only option you have might be, if, depending on what they do, if they do something that the first thing I do is I would become an expert in the HR policies. If they're doing things that break the HR policies, then I'd find a way to record them, either with a camera or voice recorder. And do you see how everything is? Put a plan in place. Quit playing the victim. Look at how you can take responsibility for yourself and take control of the situation. So those are the things I do. If I couldn't, if I did those things and the HR people said, yes, here's the handbook, that doesn't rise to the level of a problem, then I'd make a request to transfer to a different section. If that doesn't work, then I'd find a new job. In other words, it always comes back to responsibility for yourself. Now, if it's coworkers, that's different, because that's more of an equal playing field. I know for me, there's only been a couple times I've always had my own companies. There was a stretch where I worked for somebody, and when they're abusive people, I just didn't engage. Remember, Penny, I don't know if you tuned in when I did the example on boundaries and used the tennis. If you just tuned in, please watch the full live stream where I do the analogy on boundaries, and use the tennis court as, playing tennis is how to exercise boundaries. So when I'm in a toxic environment, and this can happen at parties, not just work situations, but when people are bullies and I notice it, I just create physical distance. I stay away from them. And if they try and poison the office, I don't engage it. I don't play the game. Remember, nobody makes us feel, think, do, or believe anything. If somebody's saying lies about me, I use my container and I ask myself, is it true? No. So what can I control? I can control if I choose to allow my childhood feelings from the past to infect me in this moment and give them that power over me and make them my God. Do I want to do that? No. So, and then also, if you learn how judgment, blame, and criticism works, then I would take my next step and I'd go, okay, so what is it they said about me? I'd learn to take their descriptors and metaphors, flip them around, and realize they're talking about themselves and how much they dislike themselves. And now I'm set free. And so bullies don't bug me. Now if they rise to the level of abuse, same thing. Record it, HR. If HR doesn't do it, get a lawyer. Go look. I have all this evidence that shows there's workplace violence. Da 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 da. I want to prosecute this. Go get it. In other words, it's always about taking responsibility. Focus on what I can control. Put a plan in place. Stop playing the victim. Nobody, and to exercise this, like you just have to go educate yourself. And, that's why I've offered all of these different books. I've offered my class, all the different things I teach and everything. Give you all the skills and tools you need to handle all of these situations. You just have to choose if you want to invest in them and learn them. All right. I just received your new book. Didn't realize it was your second book. Should I read your first book first? That's from T. Cancella. Great question. Here's my first book, Your Journey to Success. Here's my second book, Your Journey to Being Yourself. You can read this without this. I will say that you will get, here's what I would do. Since you have this, go ahead and read it. I'd order this. All right. Then I'd go back after you read this, I'd read this one, then I'd read this one again. And you're going to be blown away at your understanding of things when you'd use that. My books are books that you need to read 3 to 5 times a year for 5 to 10 years because of how shame and denial work and self-deception work. I already know there are sentences in both books that you will read and you won't see what I'm saying because I know how shame and self-deception works. You're too early in recovery, and that's not to be disparaging. I know that you won't see a piece that I've laid out for you that is monumental in your recovery, not because you're bad or defective, but because that's how denial and self-deception works. As you confront more of your self-deception, your self-esteem rises. And so you're going to be able to see sentences that you missed. But right now, because of the attachment authenticity bind that you're in from childhood, the worst day cycle, your self-esteem won't allow you to see a level of truth. It'll skip right over it. Remember the left hemisphere, it'll deny it. It won't see it. And the reason I know that is because I lived the journey. I was in and I'm still in self-deception, like every day. Literally, I wake up every day and my patio is over there. And before the sun comes up, I stand up there, have coffee. And the first question out of my mouth is, and pardon my language, but this is what I say to myself while I'm standing there, as I go, okay, Kenny, where are you full of shit today? Self-deception. All of us are in massive self-deception. All of us think we know who we are and we don't. And when you do the research, you'll realize, look, 95 to 99% of our adult life, we are just reliving childhood programs. I know you think you're making a conscious decision and you're an adult and you know what you're doing. That's not how the brain and body works. It's not. Remember, information comes in and it bounces off our history and our memories and creates a definition for it right there. Whatever information came in, it's already being run through the past. And so until you're an expert in your past, you can't be present. And so because you can't discern that the thought and feeling that came up is actually unhealed childhood trauma from the past. You think it's about your present, and it's not. Well, the only way you can get present is you have to be, and that's what this book shows you. There are things in this book I've never talked about in videos. I've never laid out in my classes, anything about self-deception and denial. If you don't know that process, you will not connect to your authentic self. You can't. And so that's why I wrote this book. Okay. And so the process is in here, especially the denial and self-deception. That's what I use to confront myself with on a daily basis. And so every single day, I recognize and see another area where I've been lying to myself. We all lie to ourselves on average 10 to 200 times a day. And you're going to see there are 21. Here's another great book for you, Spy the Lie. You're going to learn about this in my book. There are 21 ways. This came from CIA agents who figure out a process to tell when people are lying. There are 21 signs of people who are lying. And I'm not going to give it all away. It's in my book. But once you learn all of that, you're going to realize, oh my God, just telling the story of making breakfast in the morning, you lied like 3 times. Like, you're going to realize everyone, like the normal phrase, what we call normal phrases are self-deception. It's fascinating. You're going to see that everybody, all we're ever doing, not all, almost all any of us are ever doing is lying. That there's a uniform ways of speaking to each other that are deceptive. And that's why we don't trust anybody, because the body doesn't lie. And that's why when you get in fights with somebody and you go, that's not what you said. And they go, no, listen to it. I recorded it. And you go, no, because you picked up on the underlying denial, self-deception techniques. It's not in their words. A lot of it you're figuring out, but you don't know the process. Now, the flip side is you do that also. Okay. And if you don't think you're a liar, that's how that just says you are a huge liar. Like, I'm not trying to disparage you, but that's how important it is to learn this stuff, is to see, oh my God, what we think is a normal way to talk to people, laced in it are all of these all these lies, all the ways we're lying to each other. And we didn't even know it. It's normal. It's healthy communication. It's not. And so I went and became an expert in that. So that's why I can see why I'm so full of you know what. And so that's why I'm always confronting myself, because if you want to attach to your authentic self, which means whether you're in pain or not, you always feel inherent value and worth. You can't attach to your authentic self unless you're an expert in self-deception. And almost nobody teaches anything about self-deception in recovery, in these types of, all the different teachers. Like, there's a lot of great teachers, but they're not teaching you about self-deception and denial. And that's why their processes, that's why you're not getting anywhere. Or you're seeing marginal improvement because you don't know where you're in deception. It's critical. It's the most important part of recovery. And that's why I wrote the book. It's because nobody wrote. I'm like, why isn't anyone writing it? So it gives you, it gives you step-by-step processes so you can figure it out for yourself. Okay. Let's see. Oh my gosh, I've been going for 2 hours. Who else is here? Very good examples of boundaries. I'm glad you like them, Deborah. Anything I can do to make my narc wife a little self-aware and get help? No, Samir. See, this is the victim mindset. And I don't mean to be hard on you. This is codependence right there. That's a godlike position, to think we have enough power to change somebody else. That shows how codependent we are and how much help we need. That's a controlling mechanism. I want my wife to be different. I want her to be more self-aware and get help. No, that's the victim position. I'm going to stay here and complain about how she's lacking awareness, when the truth is I'm lacking awareness. for how I'm in self-deception and trying to control somebody, and she's been showing me for years this is who she is, and I keep wanting her to get help and be different. That is severe control. That's what a narcissist does. That's what people don't realize. This is why I get, the narcissist communities and the teachers. They keep going, oh, you poor thing. They're such a covert blah. There's all these thousands of names for narcissists now. Like, it's just become this kitchen soup of, I don't know. It's all silly to me. Because none of it's a solution. Quit wasting your time on trying to figure them out and get them help. Get yourself help. Like, what that says, Samir, is you need to get help. You need to learn that you don't have power and control over anybody, that you can't get anybody help. Only they get to choose that. And if we want someone to get help, that's a sign that we are. See, what you don't realize is you just showed one of the deceptive techniques. You're talking to yourself. You're screaming at yourself that you need to go learn how to become self-aware and get help. That's the value of learning of self-deception, is you didn't know that your question wasn't about your wife. It was about you. That's why this book is so important. You can't hear yourself and your deception. And I don't mean to single you out. I'm not saying you're bad. I would just finish saying how normal speech is filled with deception. There it is. We would think that's a normal, healthy question. It's not. It's filled with lies. Nobody knows that that question is directed at themselves, not the other person. That's why this book is so powerful and why you need it. At least, well, I don't know if you need it. I don't know that that's true. That's a lie. You don't need it. You get to decide if you want it, if you want that level of attachment to yourself. So it's not a need. You can survive without it. It's a question of a want. What do you want in your life? That's more. See, look how full of what I am. I just lied right there going, oh, you need this. No, you don't. You might want it, but it is not a need. And well, I'm going to split hairs. I'm going to quit wasting my time. You get my point. Let's see. I was love bombed, felt good before the abandonment. Now I'm alone. I hurt a lot. Yeah, that's what happens when we're codependent and we're stuck in childhood trauma. We choose love bombing and we choose abandonment. And so, Monique, when I was in your shoes, I had to go become an expert and realize I chose a person who would abandon me. I flipped it around. The real truth is I chose to abandon myself. That's why I picked them. They didn't abandon me. I abandoned me when I picked them. That's the truth. That's another deceptive question. This is my point. She thinks it's about them. I was love bombed. I was the victim. It happened to me. This is what we promote in the culture. It's wrong. I chose a person who would love bomb me so I could re-experience abandonment and I could stay the hurt child and the victim so I didn't have to take responsibility for healing my codependence and my childhood trauma. That's the truth of what she's really saying, but no one has taught her how to hear herself. So Monique, I'm not trying to say you're a bad person. I really appreciate your vulnerability because you're teaching everyone how self-deception works. So your statement is a gift. It's not a problem, but you're proving my point that until you learn how self-deception works, YouTube is filled with comments like that. All of those are self-deception. Every single one of them. Every single one of them. They don't know that they're lying to themselves. I find that heartbreaking. Now you get to decide. You might decide you need this book so you can learn that. You may decide you want this book. I'll let you decide if you think it's a need or if you think it's a want. I know for me, I needed to learn this so I could stop living like that. For me, it was a need. I'll let you decide. Do you see how I'm playing tennis with boundaries? Like every once in a while, I jump over the net and I tell you what to do, and then I catch myself, get my boundaries back, and then I offer. I'm hitting shots over the net, but I'm allowing you to decide if you want to play with them or not. Okay, so I'm modeling what boundaries and adult, mature, and moderation conversation looks like. Okay. So how do I deal with liars when I know they are lying? Well, the first thing I would ask myself is I would turn all of that around and go, okay, so how do I deal with me when I know I'm a liar? Like, again, it's not about them. There's another statement. We're talking about ourselves. And so someone who's always surrounded by liars is lying to themselves because they're choosing to surround themselves with liars. And so they think they're the problem. No, look, remember, nobody gets near us unless we allow it. So why am I choosing people who are liars? Because I like to lie. Because why? What are the benefits? Like, you need to know the self-deception process so you can see how you're lying to yourself. If you don't know that process, you think they're doing it to you. They're not. We're doing it to ourselves. Okay? Again, like, I love all of these questions, but realize every time you pose a question about them, you're telling me about you and what you want to recover in yourself. So, if you don't want to know the truth about yourself, don't pose those type of questions. Okay. I'm sending this out there. So if you want a boundary around and you don't want to hear truth, that's how you can avoid hearing truth, is don't pose a question where you want me to give you an answer about how to deal with somebody else, because it's not them you want an answer to. You want an answer to yourself. That's how self-deception works. Okay. Way to go, everyone. Yeah, I agree, Nick. Way to go, everyone. That I would say that too. Everyone's doing a great job. Oh, wait, what's this? Shaquille, with emotional intimacy boundaries, is it healthy to choose how much personal information to share? Yes, exactly. If someone gives unsolicited advice repetitively, can we withhold information? Yes. I know if someone gives me unsolicited information, I set a boundary and I go, can I ask a favor? In the future, would you be willing not to tell me who you think I am unless I give you permission? Or would you be willing not to tell me what you think I should do unless I give you permission? If they do it again, then I don't allow those people in my life. So like the other person, what do I do with liars? I don't deal with liars. I set boundaries. So, again, it's all about taking responsibility. Nobody gets near us. Nobody treats us poorly unless we allow it. Okay? That's right, Deborah. Until you're an expert in your past, you can't be in your present. None of us can. It's not possible, because our brain, the way our brain works, everything, it's running it against learned programs from the past. Well, if you don't know those learned programs, you think you're in the present, you're not. And the proof of that is, look, your adult life is just as traumatic and crazy as your childhood. It's in, maybe a different type of disarray, but it's in disarray. You're just reliving it. That's how the brain and body is designed. And that's why I keep offering all of these books and classes, is so if you want to know, you can see that that's the truth too. Okay? Feelings are like warnings and distress signals of inner child. Listen to them. Yes, that's another way of looking at it. Well said, Cindy. So we're all projecting. Yes, we are. That's right, Samir. We're all projecting. And we thought our narcissist was projecting. Actually, both are projecting. It's mutual. Both are in deception. All right. And both might be telling truth, like it may be true that the narcissist is being abusive, but our choosing to stay and yell in their face is abusive too. So it's both of us. So I go through all the denial mechanisms, and like, if you want to learn about how all of that, so you can make sense of it, it's in the new book. I glance at it in this book. I give you the basics. This is the foundation of what's going on, with very solid tools to get you started. This takes everything to a whole new level. Okay. This takes you to the center of the earth of what's going on. Okay. Let's see. Super grateful to be here. I'm super grateful that you're here too. You're welcome, Monique. Audible books. This book is available in Audible, Ruthesh. This book, I finished recording the Audible this week. It will be posted, if I'm lucky, the end of this week or maybe the following. So by the end of this month, the Audible for this book will be available. I do all the reading of the Audible. I personally think, because you have to remember, only 7% of all communication is words. 93% is tone and body language. So when you read, did you know that when you read, this is why texting is terrible. Don't ever text if you want to date somebody. Get them on the phone. When you read something, you're going to project your own emotions onto the words. And since I teach truth, your left hemisphere is going to go berserk. It's going to want to go in denial, and it'll get angry and play the victim. So I always encourage people, if you can, listen to my books first to calm down the left hemisphere, because your right hemisphere will feel what's going on. All right. And it'll help your left hemisphere process. So I always tell people the best way to consume my books is to listen to them first. Don't take any notes. Just listen to them. Then read them. Then go back and listen to them again. Like then, once you've listened, then you can read and take notes. But then just keep alternating between the two. It's also the fastest way to assimilate new concepts is to mix that, do the mix of things. It's the fastest way to understand it, all of that stuff. So that's my suggestion, but I trust you to use a process that works best for you. All right. Alex Ray Cat Maui says, I need to kick him out. It's going to be a scary situation. Well, if it were me and I needed to kick somebody out, I wouldn't just do that. I would put an exit plan in place. I would go become an expert. I'd learn how to put an exit plan in place. I might even have to hire someone like me to teach them, okay, here's what you do with bank accounts. Here's what you do with the clothes. Here's what you do with the police. Like, there's a whole process. You don't just go up and go, hey, get out. Yeah, that's scary. You put a plan in place to protect yourself so that it's not scary, so that it goes well and you are safe. And again, I can't say this enough. Go become an expert. Do the work. Learn what the right way to do this stuff is. You won't learn it by watching 15-second TikTok videos. I laugh all the time when people respond to my short videos and go, well, this is terrible. Where's the solution? And I'm like, I'm talking about concepts that take 20 hours to explain. And we've taken a 40-second clip and they somehow think they're going to get a full psychological understanding of a narcissist in 45 seconds. People are funny. Our culture. And anyway, you got to learn a lot of stuff to understand these things. And that's just fun. Like, because everyone's like, oh, I don't want to learn. It's fun. Learning is fun. So at least it is to me. You get to do what you want. Give me the name, please, of your first book, Your Journey to Success. And I think I'm going to wrap up, guys. Unless if there's anyone else, if you'd like to donate, if this has helped you at all, I'd appreciate a donation. You don't have to. I love it when people say no to me. No is the most loving. You're going to learn how to say no in my book, in this book, and why it's the most loving thing you can say to anyone. So you don't have to donate anything. If you'd like to, you can. If anyone has a burning question that they want to get out, because I'm about to end it, because I'm emotionally, I'm getting drained. But this is my first book, Your Journey to Success. This is my next book, Your Journey to Being Yourself. Now, I will give you an advice. I think the hardback is the prettiest. I just love it. It's so pretty. But the other two books get on Amazon. If you decide you want the pretty version, because I have the authentic self cycle here, the worst day cycle, and the color, it's more the purple I wanted. This purple, for whatever reason, came out a bit darker. This is the actual purple. I don't know. I like things that are pretty. That's why I dress the way I do. The hardback is just pretty. And this is really cool. I'm kind of doing this for me. I'm getting special covers made for the hardback where the brain tree is going to be embossed in gold foil. So embossed means it's going to be three-dimensional. It's going to be pressed onto it. And so everywhere you see gold, it'll be gold foil. And this will be embossed. I'm going to get, I don't know, 20, 50, 100 of them. And then I may offer like a special, look, limited edition, embossed gold leaf, hardcover edition, signed, and come up with some sort of price, like, special limited. And then I'll number them, like you got number 1 or number 5 or whatever. Because I'm doing it for me. Even if you guys don't care and would never buy it, I just think it's pretty. And I love pretty. So, but the least expensive way to do it is get the paperback and go through Amazon. If you like pretty like me, go to Barnes and Noble, because Amazon on the hardback, they just cut it right here. You don't get these interior flaps. Only Barnes and Noble gives you these interior flaps. And I think it's pretty. So if you like pretty and you want hardback, go to Barnes and Noble. All right. Okay. I think I'm going to shut down. I think I've given you all the books. Remember, you can get all the books. I'm going to go through them one more time. How Emotions Are Made by Lisa Feldman Barrett. The Master and His Emissary by Ian McGilchrist, to learn about the brain and self-deception. Pia Melody, Facing Codependence, Facing Love Addiction, Intimacy Factor. All of those can be found on my website under the recommended reading list. I encourage you to read all of them. They're incredibly helpful on your journey. Obviously, I encourage you to read mine. Many people don't know. I'm finding out many people don't know that I do private sessions. So if you need a private session, you can go to my website and book one. I also have my whole online classes, which walk you through all of this. Please go to my website. I've said this before. There's an Ask Kenny feature. Use the Ask Kenny feature. As soon as you open up my website, it says Ask Kenny. You can type in any question you want, and it pulls from all of my content, whether it's from a book, a blog, a video, and then it gives you a bibliography and tells you exactly which video. So it gives you the answer and gives you a whole list of videos or what book or blog to read, so you get the full answer. And it's free. It doesn't cost you a dime. So I put out a tremendous amount of content for free to try and help you. But I will tell you this: if you want to recover, you will have to invest in yourself. Doing the free stuff, you will not get there. And again, I say this all the time: you don't have to invest in my processes, but you are going to have to pick a teacher that you know, like, and trust. And you're going to have to invest in their programs, or even hire them to help you get to the other side of all of this. So, all right. Sweet dreams to everybody. Yes. Thank you, Isabella. My dad had a purple race car called Plum Crazy. I like that, Cindy. That's cute. Adam, I'm glad you liked it. Susan, you're very welcome. Monique, you're welcome. Nick, Shiroku. My eyes are blurry. I'm getting tired. I ordered my new book. Awesome. Yol is back. Didn't see you there. Good to see you, Yol. Let's see. Lexi Cat, Ruth Mesh. I wish I could call out all of your names. I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to share this information. I hope it's cleared up the difference between empath and empathy, and that really we all just need childhood trauma recovery and codependence recovery. And there's nothing wrong with any of us. We're all perfectly imperfect. We're human, we're limited, and we always have inherent value and worth, even in our imperfections. And I hope you all choose, if you want to, if it works on your side of the tennis court and the way you want to play the game of life. If you want recovery, I hope I've offered you some suggestions. I believe I've offered you some suggestions that will walk you down that recovery path, so you can live in your authentic self and live in emotional, intellectual, physical, every aspect of peace. So Thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate you trusting me with your journey. Have a great night, everybody.